Welcome to another episode of SummitCast. In this show, we're going to be talking about our election system is broken. What do we do about it? In our last show, we didn't talk about fraud in the 2020 elections because you're not allowed to talk about that on YouTube, or at least not unless you have the right conclusion, or at least not unless you have the right conclusion.
Yes,
So
but there is no fraud.
there is
That
no-
is the right conclusion.
That is the only conclusion that you can talk about on YouTube. So we're not going to go there, but what we are going to talk about is kind of picking up where we left last show, which was the idea that the restrictions or the safeguards that were in the election system, like for example, proof of residency for to register to vote, or signature verification on mail-in ballots. So there's been progressively weakened, and they were certainly weakened tremendously for the recent election, and it was done under the pretext of coronavirus and in-person voting not being safe and so on. But it was actually policies which some people have been trying to implement for many years, and there's been a campaign for many years of basically not just trying to go to the legislatures, but actually to go to the courts to bypass the legislatures and to declare, for example, that requiring a ID to vote is racially discriminatory because minorities don't have IDs and things like that. And so under the guise of promoting racial equality, they were loosening these restrictions. So we saw that in the recent election, and that is a large part of the basis of the lawsuit that the state of Texas brought against the other four states in the Supreme Court. And that's going on now, and we'll see what happens. But just to kind of look at the issue in general, one thing we can see is, that this is going to affect elections from now on. It's kind of an open question whether there was fraud in this election that affected the result.
No, it's not. It's not an open question
Not for
at all.
YouTube. For a lot of people, a lot of people do believe it.
Right.
If you look at surveys, a lot of people believe it in the nation.
I think that's a fair statement, that there is a stronger question of the election being fraudulent by people in general than there ever, or in my memory, has been.
Yeah. There was a lot of concern after the Bush-Gore one,
Right.
that it was such a narrow margin, and it ended up being decided by the Supreme Court.
Right.
And so a lot of people felt that wasn't really kosher. But then I think the level of unhappiness or non-confidence in this election is higher than it's ever been. I think that's really true, and that actually is a major problem. Because if people lose faith in elections, then it's kind of like the fundamental basis for democracy, and the system of government.
It basically is, yeah.
I saw actually on have you heard of Matt Brainerd?
Mm-mm.
He was doing analysis of the voting in this recent election. He's really worth looking at if you wanted to look at allegations of fraud that may have a solid basis. He did some very solid work on that, and it's been quoted in a number of lawsuits. But one thing he said is that, if you look at government and, the government isn't doing a great job in fixing the potholes, or there's problems with Social Security or Medicare, or there's all these other things that you can not have a lot of confidence in government in handling.
Right.
But if you don't have confidence that government can handle elections, then elections are the thing that enable you to do something about all the others.
Yeah, exactly. Those enable the others.
Yeah. And what he was saying is that you may or may not have evidence of a lot of intentional fraud in the election, and it's hard to get into people's minds, what was their motive in doing something. But what's really clear is there was a lot of incompetence. Is the nice way to characterize a lot of incompetence and poor procedures and so on in the current election.
Right. So what can we do about that?
Yeah, what can we do about that? And he actually had some very good ideas, which I think are worth looking at. And we'll get to that a little bit later in the show. We talked about loosening the restrictions and in the last show, and the concept of will people take advantage of that? And people who are in favour of loosening restrictions say they won't take advantage of that. And the safeguards are still
Scouts honor. I would never do that.
Scouts honor. I remember, who was it? Was it New York saying, they changed the rules for registering to vote, and that they weren't requiring any proof of citizenship to register to vote because that would be inconvenient. But then it was the governor or the mayor was saying, if you're not a citizen, please don't register. Your honor.
It's like, I'm going to leave my keys in my car here. Please don't steal my car.
Please don't steal my car. Yeah, exactly.
Put a little sign on there that says, I have left my keys in my car. Please don't steal my car.
Most people are honest.
Most people would walk by and not steal your car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So someone from New York should understand that this isn't really the way the world works.
Right.
In Montana, you can do that. I know people who don't lock their house in rural Montana.
I definitely don't lock my house.
Yeah.
But I worry more about bears coming in our house than...
That's what you worry about in Montana.
Absolutely. You don't want those little flappy handled doors on your house, because the bears will just use that to
The
come
bears
right
have figured out how to open those.
Yeah, for sure.
But New York City, you don't...
Not the same.
It's not the same. And so I think with the thing with elections is you got to have safeguards up front. And, the idea that people won't take advantage of it, I think has been, it's disproved by what we're seeing in real time happening right now with people encouraging fraud in the Georgia runoff. Yeah.
I haven't heard that. Okay.
Yeah. We've got an article by which talks about it. And this is the Secretary of State of Georgia. So he's saying, this is from the Epoch Times. What's the date? December 1st. Georgia groups attempting to register out-of-state voters, and that's Raffensperger, the Secretary of State. So he says, he gives some examples here. America Votes has been sending absentee ballots to people with addresses where they haven't lived since 1994, according to the official. So what they do is they look at the voter registration rolls, they compare that with people who've moved out of state, which you can get from the National Change of Address database, and they find these people are still registered there. So they send them an absentee ballot request to their new address. So they can request an absentee ballot. They know the Georgia election is big. They think, I still feel a tie to Georgia.
Right.
I still care what happens in Georgia.
Yes.
So I'm going to vote.
Unfortunately, you don't live in Georgia.
Yes, unfortunately, it's a felony.
Yeah, right.
Which is what Raffensperger is saying.
Wow, okay.
So something else. Vote Forward attempted to register a dead Alabama woman to vote in Georgia. The New Georgia Project allegedly sent voter registration applications to New York City. Again, people who'd moved out of Georgia. And Operation New Voter Registration Georgia is accused of telling college students that they can change their residency to Georgia and change it back after the election.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's like blatantly illegal.
Yeah, it's a felony.
Right.
And
That's
there's
a
other
good way to start your college for the rest of your life, is in prison.
Yeah. And there's other people. There was a columnist for, I think, the New York Times, who was on the air on CNN encouraging people to move to Georgia to vote in this election because it's so important, and then move back afterwards.
Well, I mean, Georgia might be nice. It probably has better weather in the winter at least than New York. Yeah.
What Raffensperger said, if you do that, you may find yourself staying in Georgia longer than you had intended.
Yes.
But
for several years.
For several years.
You get 3 meals a day, though.
Yes,
Expenses are low.
which is not bad in the coronavirus. And you can't go out, but you can't go out at home anyway. So,
You get 1 hour a day. You get 1
Yeah.
hour a day. Yeah.
yeah. So what we're seeing is that, people are taking advantage of it. And I think one thing that you got to think about with voter fraud is that in some ways it's different from other crimes because trying to prosecute it after the fact doesn't really solve the problem
Yep.
because the election's already over then.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, to prosecute, to prove a crime, gather all the evidence and do all the investigation and run it through a court system and get a conviction takes weeks or months for, most types of crime. And I think it's probably fair to say that it does for voter fraud too. Cases where people have been prosecuted for voter fraud later, it's the convictions have come, months or years after the
And that's
election.
wonderful. I'm happy that they've been convicted if they did in fact do it.
Yeah,
But the election's still already over.
the election's over. Yeah, that's the problem, and that's the big problem with the current situation. And if there is substantial voter fraud, there actually isn't time, in the time frame of the election, and the new person coming to office to actually investigate it properly.
Right. So much better to shore up our systems and find the areas where it's not ensuring that the election is fair.
It's the only way to do it. Unless you have safeguards in place to prevent it. Trying to catch it after the fact, it's too late.
Yep.
And the other problem with that is if it's the party that did the fraud that gets into power, they've got absolutely no incentive to try
Right.
to prosecute the fraud.
Right.
And that's the thing that happens that's the Venezuela thing again. The government wins the election, so they can make sure that, none of the fraud gets investigated.
Right.
And, unfortunately, what we're seeing is that that's kind of where a lot of people are thinking we're heading with the election system in the nation. And it's got to be turned around. There's got to be, I do believe there's enough people of goodwill
Absolutely.
who want free and fair elections.
I think the vast majority want free and fair elections.
Yeah,
I would say.
and they'd rather have free and fair elections than their candidate to get elected.
Right. I would hate that. I would hate that if I voted for someone and then it was found out that it was fraudulently won. I would personally, I would want some kind of revote or something.
Yeah.
That we can really know for sure.
Yeah. And I think the problem is that there's a vocal minority that doesn't share that point of view. And, like we talked about last week, if you're willing to burn down buildings and neighborhoods,
What's a few votes?
what's an election fraud, Right. And there's people saying, we need to get rid of Trump, whatever it takes, and burning down buildings is part of what they include. So voter fraud is nothing. It's very minor. There's no victim, no one's hurt, supposedly,
Right.
So,
So what can we do about it?
well, I think the silent majority who wants to have free and fair elections really has to, rise up in a bipartisan way
Right.
and say, we've got to fix our election system. I think if nothing else comes out of this election, that's what needs to happen. There needs to be a real consensus across the political spectrum, probably excluding the extremes on both sides. But across the spectrum, that we need to fix the election system, and there are ways to do it. And Montana, I think, is doing pretty well. I haven't heard any allegations of election fraud in Montana. I think they take it seriously, and
Despite our mail-in, because we did widespread mail-in voting.
yeah. But I think they had legitimate safeguards in place. I don't know what they do to make sure the voter rolls are up to date. But I think, as far as I know, they do signature verification and they take that seriously. And there hasn't been any major allegations of fraud here, which I think is really good. I think you can vote in Montana and feel like your vote's going to count.
Right.
And some of these other states, I think a lot of people are feeling like that's no longer the case, and it really needs some urgent work. We talked about some things last week. We talked about, a national voter registration database.
Right.
I think that's a really big issue, and that's one of the things that Matt Brainerd was investigating, who I was telling you about earlier. He was he set up a program called the Voter Integrity Project, and he analysed these databases of people who voted in different states and cross-reference that with the National Change of Address database and find like X number of people moved to a new state and registered in that state and voted in that state, and yet they're still voting in this state. And you don't know if it's them voting in this state
or someone who moved in to their address after them,
or somebody who registered got their ballot and sent it in their name. Signature matching should theoretically catch that.
Right.
But the national database is one thing that I think is really key. You've got to have some sort of way of getting rid of duplicates like that, or fraudulent applications, or people who vote when their residence is in another state.
Or move temporarily.
Or they move temporarily, yeah. I mean, if you're going to move somewhere, you've got to cancel the registration in the previous state, or for example, And one thing you got to do, I think, for that to work is that you got to be able to figure out the identity of the people on the roll. And at the moment, there's basically two pieces of data. There's the name and there's the date of birth. And the problem with that is there are people with the same name and date of birth in the country with 300 million people.
Within the same state, I guess.
Could be within the same state. Apparently, it's quite common to have people with different names and dates of birth. But then, even if they're in different states, it looks like the same person voted in two different states if you just go by name and date of birth. Right. So you got to have it tied to, and the most obvious thing to tie it to is the Social Security number.
Right, because everyone who has a Social Security isn't automatically entitled to vote, but it is a unique ID.
Yeah, you can't have two different people with the same Social Security number voting in different places, or voting twice in the same state, or whatever.
Right. So there still would have to be that the states would still verify the ability to vote, whether the
residency, for example.
Residency.
Yeah.
Well, residency and citizenship would be one. My wife is from another country. She lives in the state I live in, and yet she's not allowed to vote despite her residency.
Yeah. Yeah, that should be verified too. It should be part of the verification process. But I think that's part of the Social Security database, isn't it?
Is citizenship part of that database? I don't know.
I actually don't know. I know that
your work status.
Status is. So I would think citizenship might be too. If it's not, then it could be added.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
You might get some political pushback on that, of course.
Yeah, you could be here on a work visa. And so
temporary work visa.
Right. So you have the ability to work, but
yeah.
I don't know. Streamlining the citizenship test, because I agree it is cumbersome if every time you register to vote or in a new state, you would need to bring your passport in and bring a form of ID that shows that you are allowed to vote. That could be an undue burden. But so if it was once you've registered to vote once. Showing your birth certificate or showing your passport or showing some form of that, then it would, from then on, allow you to.
Yeah. Another way to do it, which something Matt Brainerd suggested, he said that rather than having signature verification, have a fingerprint verification.
Okay.
One thing, it's not possible to fraudulently try to copy someone's signature.
Oh, come on now. Haven't you seen Mission Impossible? They do it all the time.
Not possible to do it on a mass scale. Probably. Okay. Difficult to do. I mean, there was allegations of someone said they saw 30 absentee ballots come in a row with different names, but the handwriting of the signatures was all the same.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it would weed out low-tech things like that. The other advantage of signature verification of fingerprint is that signature verification is pretty subjective, and I mean, the reason they got rid of it in Pennsylvania is there's cases where, someone has a stroke and their signature changes, or people's signature does change over time, and, does it really match what's on the, their card? And then in some places, with the motor voter thing, where they register you to vote automatically.
Motor voter?
Motor voter. You haven't heard of that?
Never. Sounds like a band.
Yeah, it's this thing. It's this motor voter thing where when you get a driver's license, they automatically register you to vote.
Right. Okay.
Right.
I think Montana does that. No.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, they do it in California, and they did it in New York. And they introduced it in New York, and they said, please don't register to. And you had to opt out registering to vote.
Really? Oh, okay.
Rather than opt in. Yeah. In some places, when you register, you get your driver's license, you sign on the little LCD screen.
Yeah, right.
So
those are terrible.
They're terrible. It doesn't look like anything like your signature.
I mean, my signature is terrible. As you say, they've changed over time. I looked at an old document that was 10 years old or something, and I was like, wow, I signed it. Like, you can clearly read every letter in my name, and my signature now, the first letter of my first name and the first letter of my last name are legible, but everything else, it's just a scribble in between.
Yeah. So in places where they do motor voter, the signature on file that they have to match against may be this thing from the LCD screen in the DMV, and trying to match a real signature to that, I mean, anybody's guess.
So fingerprints.
So fingerprint, you can match it by computer.
Right.
That's the thing. So it can be automatically done. I mean, they did computer matching of signatures in Nevada.
Okay.
I think it was in Nevada.
Seems like something a computer would be great at.
Maybe it was Arizona. Yeah. And they were getting so many rejections that they had to lower the threshold of signature match lower and lower, and then they finally just gave up altogether because there was still too many rejections.
Wait a minute. Sounds strange.
Yeah. So, but the thing with the fingerprints, you can do it. The computer can do it, and it's unambiguous. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking when I read this, well, how would you do that? People have to go in and get the fingerprints taken. But you could figure out a thing. You send them a little.
It happens all the time.
A little ink pad in the thing, which you peel the thing off, you stick your thumb on it, put that on the envelope. I think you could do an easy way that people could do it at home where it wouldn't be a burden, and then.
How do you prove that's actually their thumb, though? What if they just took Grandma's thumb and said, "Don't worry what I'm doing here, Grandma. I'm just, you just give me your thumb."
Well, that is the problem with mailing.
Like it would need to be in person.
That's called the granny problem.
The granny problem. Is this a well-known problem?
It's a well-known problem. Yeah, and I mean, it's a well-known strategy if you want to try to get fraudulent votes. You go to a nursing home.
Oh, right. Okay.
And you help people.
You're holding the pen for them.
Fill out the ballots. Yeah. I mean, this is something they used to do in Chicago. You heard about the days of the Chicago Democratic machine?
No, I haven't heard of that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Read the stories about that if you want to read about voter fraud. I mean, it was they would go. The Democratic Party people would go to the nursing homes and help the people fill out the ballots, fill them out for them, and then hold their hand while they signed it. And
theoretically, the signature wouldn't match at that point, then would it? I don't know.
Yeah, well, maybe they get them to sign it after they filled it out. I mean, and then the nursing homes would allow people to do it because they were dependent on contracts from the city. Mm. So the Democrats basically had a total lock on Chicago politics for decades.
Wow. Okay.
And it's notorious. You can read about it in Wikipedia. You can read about it online.
Can you watch videos about it on YouTube? It's a historical election.
It's a historical election. Yeah. And an interesting thing about that historically is that the Chicago Democratic machine actually did flip the 1960 presidential election.
I think I did hear something about that. Yeah.
And that's a historical fact. You can read about that.
200 votes or something.
It was. I don't remember what the margin was, but it was very close. It was Kennedy Nixon.
Okay.
And it was very close, and it came down to a few precincts in Chicago that made the difference and tipped it Kennedy's way. And Nixon, the story is, he knew that the result was fraudulent, but he decided not to contest it for the good of the country because it would be so divisive.
Right. Well, especially if it just came down to Illinois, to one state. Yeah. Whereas at least in our current situation, there's these allegations across
6 states.
6 states,
so, yeah. So where were we?
Fingerprints.
Fingerprints, that's right. Yeah, so fingerprints is one way to do that. The National Voter Registration Database. Another thing, there's the potential problems with voting machines and the computerized systems. And one article I saw about that said you need to have open source software.
Have the code checked. So,
yeah. You can have proprietary code secure, like Windows, for example, I think is probably pretty secure, but whenever they find something. But it's out there, and a lot of people are testing it. A lot of people are looking for exploits, and they patch them as soon as they can.
Right. I think the lack of physical access, I think that was something that I had heard about the current voting machines, that there was allegations that they had been plugged into the internet at some point during the election or thereafter, or that the USB ports were active. Any kind of security expert will tell you physical access has to be restricted.
Yeah, well, they have physical ports. I mean, that's how they transfer the votes to the other system. So,
right.
That's obviously not secure.
Well, and I think they're using some type of memory format, not USB sticks. It's like an SD card.
I thought it was USB.
Is that right?
I think it's USB. The Dominion ones, they store the vote totals on a USB and then they transfer it to the central counting one or whatever they do.
I don't know why I thought it was on an SD format.
Yeah, it could be. Maybe they're just using the wrong words in the articles because they don't know the difference between a USB card and an SD card.
Right, but there's definite ways, open source or other methods to ensure that there's some semblance of security.
Yeah, because there's not even any real. With Windows, there's lots of people checking for vulnerabilities all the time and finding them and patching them. But with the voting system, people don't have access to it, so there's not that continual testing. So you really don't know what the vulnerabilities are. Right. And open source is one way of solving that.
But who's going to do that? I mean, you don't make any money off that, right?
Well, that's part of the problem. But I understand there are a couple of open source voting systems out there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember the details. I read that somewhere.
They actually have they're in use.
I don't know if they're in use. I mean, the part of the problem is there's no money in that, so and the money about it seems to be an issue.
Through support, I think. That's how Linux distributions and other open source platforms they generally sell support for their application.
One thing I read about the Dominion voting systems is that there's a problem with them in the scanners. If you scan for more than 4,000 ballots, you get a memory fragmentation issue.
Okay.
And the recommended solution for this is to power cycle the machine. you can believe it. That's the official solution to this software bug.
Turn it off and turn it on again.
Yeah, you have to do that every 4,000 votes. I mean, it doesn't give you a lot of confidence in how well this software is built, does it?
No, and the hardware underlying it, whatever is causing this buffer issue. Yeah.
Well, it's a memory fragmentation issue, I think, is what they described. So that's just a purely software issue. They're not allocating the memory properly, and then it crashes.
Right.
So open source software. And then there's some more. There's an article here which someone sent me.
I mean, you could have, if you have, we were talking about fingerprints versus signature, but you could easily have both. I don't know why you couldn't have, if you're going to put your fingerprint on something, you could also have your signature.
Yeah.
You're doubling down on your options. Get the iris scan in there as well.
Well, the good thing about the signature is it's human readable.
Yeah.
So you can do it like, is this the same person? Is it the right person?
Right. It's pretty quick, yeah.
Yeah. And
Whereas
then
fingerprints, not so much.
And the fingerprint, you do that for the automatic, computer matching thing.
Right. Bring AI. We got to have the AI doing something before it takes over our lives.
Yeah, do something useful. There's an article which someone sent me. In fact, Andy sent me this article about voting in Australia, and it's actually quite interesting. It's quite a long article. It's really worth reading.
Okay.
What they point out is that the election system in Australia, there's really isn't any allegations of fraud there. And there's a number of ways they do that. And one of them is they have strictly non-partisan body that supervises the election. There's I can't remember what it's called. Do you remember what it's called? The Federal Election Commission or something like that?
Just the AEC, I think.
AEC, Australian Election Commission?
Yes.
Yeah. And in the article, they talk about how if you want to get employed by this, you have to, demonstrate you're non-partisan. You can't have any connection to a political party. You can't express publicly support a political party on your Facebook posts or social media or any other way. And so that's one thing. And then you have, they call them scrutineers from the parties who are, watch the whole vote counting process.
Okay.
And what they call them, election overseers or challengers here or something. Maybe it's different in different states. But when you're doing the absentee ballots and the signature matching, you're supposed to have a Democrat and a Republican and
Right.
an independent or whatever. People can observe it and watch the whole process. And that was one of the issues in the recent election, actually, is that wasn't done.
Is that a requirement just of the two, that you have a representative from, because we have third-party candidates in various different parties, but is it just a requirement that you have one Republican and one Democrat, or is it just the option that if a party wants to have someone oversee then they're allowed to?
I think it's that's my understanding. I don't know the legislation in different states, but I mean in general it's a Republican and a Democrat. But then there are also I understand independent election monitors.
Okay.
I actually saw an interview by someone. Actually, it was a testimony before one of these committees by someone who was in Michigan. She was a Republican election monitor.
Okay.
And she was in the room, and she was seeing that they were really treating the other Republican election monitors very, very badly and trying to get rid of them and prevent them from seeing anything and so on. But she was, I think she was Indian. She was obviously not a white person. And so everyone just assumed that she was a Democrat.
That's funny.
And then she started saying, talking to the election officials, why are you trying to get rid of these people? Why are you trying to prevent them from doing their job? And they said, well, what do you care? Why are you defending them? And then she pulled out her tag saying she was Republican.
Said out.
And they got rid of her.
Really?
They got rid of her. She said it was absolutely unbelievable what they were doing. And when they would find some pretext to get a Republican thrown out of the room, like their mask slipped or something, and so they'd throw them out, or they were standing less than 6 feet away, they would actually, throw them out of the room, things like that. Mm-hmm. And then so she got thrown out, but she also had credentials as an independent election monitor.
Oh, okay.
So she came back in as that, and then they treated her fine, after that.
Right.
But, treating people like that, treating just the Republicans like that and doesn't give people faith in the system, and the people who are running the election look like they were clearly partisan because they were treating the Democrats fine and they could do whatever they wanted, but they were trying to get rid of the Republicans. And people would cheer when they kicked Republicans out.
That's well, and I did hear that there was some kind of perhaps the Republican watchers, I think, are poll watchers were maybe more vocal about things not being done right, and so perhaps they would have.
It's quite possible.
Yeah, kind of like the first debate with Chris Wallace. When he became quite combative with Trump versus Biden, I think that was because
Trump was being combative.
Trump was quite combative, and so kind of he mirrored that back at Trump, and so perhaps if the Republican watchers were being more combative, I'm just
Oh, it's quite possible, and part of the problem is the emotional energy on both sides has got so amped up that
exactly
people
so
can't be
divided.
reasonable. But I thought the best testimony was this one person who had an experience as an independent and as a Republican, as what they
Right.
thought was a Democrat,
Right.
and how she got treated so differently.
Right. And as soon as they knew that she was a Republican, despite being a person of color,
exactly,
threw off all of their models,
Yeah.
all of their diagrams.
yeah,
I actually had a friend recently whose her parents are from Trinidad, and she was at some kind of rally. She was outside, and the people there who were Trump supporters didn't know how to interact with her because she's brown, and they assumed that she was a Democrat, and she said that that she was in a restaurant previous to that, and the waitress was making these derogatory comments about the Trump supporters outside to her, like these stupid Trump supporters, thinking again that she was a Republican clearly or a Democrat clearly because she was brown, and she was just watching this whole situation unfold in front of her, like, these people have no idea who I am or what I believe. They just assume based on my skin color that I am or am not supporting one candidate. It's so funny that you can divide this on racial lines, or that people believe you can be divided on down racial lines.
Yeah. Anyway, I think the bottom line is, there are ways to have a secure election without fraud. Back to that, which is what this show is all about, nominally.
Yep.
And you've got to prevent the fraud from happening rather than try and catch the people afterwards. I mean, I think the FBI actually had a policy up until the coming election where they wouldn't investigate any allegations of election fraud until the election was over.
Doesn't sound very useful. Sounds the opposite of useful.
Yeah, well, I think the reason for it was they didn't want to get involved in the election and look like they were taking sides.
Right, absolutely.
And if fraud is just on a small scale and it's a few people, doing it, which is what most of the convictions have been, then that's it's a reasonable approach. But
I don't feel like it's reasonable at all. I don't want anyone.
Well, it's based on the assumption that there's no fraud in a scale that can affect the election result.
Yeah, but it irks me to even think that. I guess having this pride in being American, that there could be any question of our system. That's what kind of irks me, that we have to take this seriously if we want to continue being a leader on the world stage. Like it or not, we are, and that. Our elections, it's not Venezuela, is what I'm saying, is that we don't want to be laughed at for having second-rate election systems.
Yeah.
And so we have ideas and ways that can clearly make a difference.
Yeah, and I think it's if nothing else comes out of this election, that's what has to come out of it. And as I said before, the majority of the people in the middle have to really take a stand and demand it. And and there's the people in the fringes who want to don't want to change it because they want to be able to do fraudulent things with the elections. But the majority of people have to stand up and say we've got to fix the election system.
Yeah.
And there are ways to do it. And
so what are the bullet points of what kind of ideas that he had, or that?
Well, the national database, I think, is really key.
Yeah.
You got to have good voter ID for in-person, and you got to have good either signature matching or even better would be fingerprint for mail-in balloting. You got to have that secure.
And the change of address, maybe. I mean, a tie-in to the change of address database, maybe. I don't
know.
know.
You got to have good voter registration databases, right. And there was one state. Can't remember if it was Wisconsin or Michigan. There was actually there's a group that was suing states for not following their state laws actually to keep voter registration databases up to date. And in this one state, they identified like 1 million people who were registered who didn't respond to a mail out, are you still at this address?
Right.
Which by law, if they don't respond, then they're supposed to be taken off the rolls.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And, it's unambiguous in the law, but the Secretary of State refused to do it. And so you have 1 million people in this state who are registered to vote who you don't know if they're still there or not.
So it's not mandatory to, this is something, you coming from Australia, you've talked about the legal requirement to vote. So they don't even have a legal requirement to respond to that letter in the U.S., right? I mean,
but if they don't respond, they get taken off the database.
Right, yeah.
They're unregistered to vote. And okay, you may, it's the thing, 100 guilty people go free. You may, there may be some people who didn't get the card or forgot about it and didn't mail it in who are genuine and would be taken off the roll and not know about it.
Maybe they send 2 letters. Maybe they send a letter maybe 2 weeks apart, and if they don't respond to either of them.
Yeah, there's ways where you can do it. But you've got to have the will to do it,
to enforce law, and
to enforce the law.
That sounds like a clear win for any kind of challenge to the law. But who's the aggrieved party in that case? If somebody tried to sue the Secretary of State saying these people that you didn't do your job to remove these people from the rolls, who's the aggrieved party? The other voters?
Well, there's other voters could do it, and then because there's a principle that if fraudulent votes are allowed, then it dilutes the value of your vote.
Right.
So and then there's this organisation which I can't remember the name of it, but they do challenge states to keep their voter registration rolls up to date.
Okay.
And so they did it probably on behalf of they rounded up some citizens of that state and did it on behalf of them. So I think it's good that there are these organisations which are out there which are trying to keep things honest.
Right.
But the part of the problem is the courts are not enforcing the laws, and that's one of the grounds of the Texas lawsuit in the Supreme Court. The courts are not only not enforcing the laws, but they're actually overruling the laws and allowing state officials to do the opposite of what the law says. So that's what the Supreme Court case is all about, and hopefully that will come to a resolution, regardless of who wins the election, that we've got to follow the laws.
Exactly.
And so it comes down to you got to have good laws in place, and you got to enforce the laws, and people have got to demand that it happens. And if courts or government or governors or secretaries of state are not abiding by the law, they've got to be held accountable.
Absolutely.
So we got to fix the election system. I think the election system is broken, and when many people don't have confidence in the election system anymore, it's a really serious thing. We got to do something about it.
And it's great that we have solutions, that there are, you know, I wouldn't call them easy, but straightforward solutions to a lot of these problems. That could be enacted.
Yeah. So I think that's a good place to end the show. Call to action, everybody. Take a stand, talk to your representatives, ask them to maybe wait until the election is over and it's no longer a political issue. But, we got to do something to make sure that elections are secure and honest from here on. It's just vital to the survival of the country.